Welcome back to the Montana Grizzly Leadership Project for Episode 2. My name is Charlie Palmer, and I am a professor in integrative physiology and athletic training here at the University of Montana. In our first installment, we had the distinct pleasure of talking with men's head tennis coach Jason Brown. And for this episode, we have a man who is in his third season as head track and field / cross-country coach, Mr. Doug Fraley. Under Doug's guidance, Grizzlies have won 8 individual Big Sky indoor and outdoor championships and have had 10 athletes appear at the NCAA first-round meet and 1 national championship qualifier. The Grizzlies have also broken several school records in Coach Fraley's time at the helm. Coach, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Charlie.
All right. So first question, you spent 12 years as an assistant coach.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Prior to here, 9 years at Tulane, where you were primarily involved with jumps and multis and sprints.
Yeah.
And then you were 3 years on the Palouse at Washington State University doing jumps and multis. So that's what you brought with you kind of to Montana.
Yeah.
At what point did you realize I want to run my own program? Or when did kind of this urge or the desire to say I want to transition from being an assistant coach into a head role? And what did that kind of look like?
Yeah, really, when I was at Tulane for almost a decade, I really enjoyed being an assistant coach there, really being able to focus on the athletes that I was coaching. Then I was elevated to the associate head coach position at Tulane and enjoyed some expanded responsibilities as far as program-wide travel and different components of that. And I really enjoyed that a lot. And then going to Washington State, I was an assistant there working with the multis and the jumpers. But really that piece of being an associate head coach at Tulane kind of lit the fire for me, and decided that, you know, at my age at that time when I was at Wazoo, hey, if you're gonna start looking for head coaching jobs, you really need to do that sooner than later. You know, I figured I have about 10 or 12 years of coaching left in me at that point, and you know, those head jobs are precious. They're not easy to get, and so if one comes available in the geographical area that is appealing to me and my wife, that I would step forward and go through the process. And I did that at Montana, and fortunately it worked out.
Yes, it did. I was fortunate enough to be on the selection committee to kind of help with that process. So it was good to get to know you through that, and awesome that we hired you as the guy to lead the program.
Oh, thank you.
All right. UM has 15 varsity sports, 9 women's and 6 men's. You're the head coach of 6 varsity sports.
Yeah, that's correct.
I doubt you get head coach salary for 6 different sports.
No.
So that's men's and women's cross country. That's men's and women's indoor track and field, and then men's and women's outdoor track and field. Just kind of talk us through some of those challenges or things that stand out to you in terms of being the head coach for 6 different distinct programs.
You know, that's the fact of the matter. I had never really thought of it that way until Kent Haslam was counting coaches at the head coaches meeting, and he went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 11 when he looked at me, and I really never thought about it that way, because when I look at a cross country and a track team, even though we're very segmented in how we train and when we train, and of course cross country has a different season than the track seasons. I look at it as one group. I look at it as a big corporation that has a lot of departments within it. And so when I think about being the head coach here at the University of Montana, I think about, you know, being the head of a big company that's got 100 people that work for it, and we all move around in different directions in our daily work. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, we are one big company, whether we represent 2 sports or 6 sports in this case. So I don't really look at it as I'm the leader of 6 sports. I look at it as being the leader of a big company that has a lot of different things going on.
Just different seasons that company's responsible for.
Right.
Yeah. And then cross country wasn't necessarily in your background in terms of subject matter expertise. You were a vertical jumper as your background. What does that look like then in terms of being the leader, the person in charge of, in this case, a sport, cross country, where it's just not necessarily in your wheelhouse and yet you're the head guy?
Yeah, and that's not uncommon in college coaching, is to have a director that is in charge of both cross country and track and field, whether or not they're a cross country person. So my job really as the director of cross country is to make sure that I have a good distance coach that is doing the day-to-day training of the athletes, and my job is to manage that, manage the travel, manage the execution of the cross-country season, and give those athletes the support that they need. It's not a hands-on coaching situation because I'm not a distance coach. So I'm really overseeing the operation while my distance coaches are taking care of the day-to-day work.
Mm-hmm. And then along those lines, you have a staff. So you have a throws coach, you've got a multis and a hurdles coach, Lindsay Hall and John Kolb, and your wife Erica. What is that? And then AJ Ekman is your distance coach. Is it different to lead? So you have nearly 100 kids in your program. Do you feel like you lead the same way in terms of how you guide those athletes as you do your staff?
One of the most important components, I think, of being a successful head coach is the staff that you hire. Because ultimately, as a head coach, I'm in charge of all 100 athletes on the cross-country and track and field teams. But I coach the sprints and the horizontal jumps group. Erica coaches the vertical jumps. Lindsay coaches the hurdlers and multis. John the throwers. AJ the distance runners. I depend on them to take care of those athletes as far as the day-to-day coaching goes. They're responsible for the development of those athletes within their event groups. And so it's important to me to know that I have a staff that I can let go to work every day. I manage our team and our staff in a direction that I want our program to go. But ultimately, having a staff of coaches that I can be confident that they're going out and doing the right things to develop their athletes, they're recruiting the right athletes. That's why it's so important to have a good staff. You've got to have people that are the head of those different departments that you trust are going to develop that area correctly. And I feel really good about that, the staff that we've put together here at Montana. I know that Erica is going to do an excellent job with the pole vaulters and high jumpers, Lindsay with the multis and hurdlers, John with the throwers, AJ with the distance runners. So I don't need to micromanage what they're doing with their groups every day, because I hired them, and the fact that I hired them because I believe they're the right person for the job. And so I'm as good as the hires that I make as assistants. That's a very important piece of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. Those people have got to be able to be in charge of their areas and feel like they're in charge of their areas without somebody breathing down their necks. And I believe that is the way that assistants perform the best. Obviously, they know that they can come to me in mentorship situations, in advice situations, and I'm happy to help them at all times. But really, my theory on how I'm dealing with my assistant coaches is to support them when they need support and let them come to me unless I see something very obvious, because that's what I've hired them to do. I've put them in charge of that event area specifically because I have faith that they're the right people in those roles.
Yeah, and then interesting that success that I talked about in terms of athlete performance really cuts across all of those. There's been top-notch performers in really each of those areas, your specialties, and then also the specialties of each of your four assistants.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I want here at the University of Montana, is I want a well-rounded program. I think if we're going to move our way up continue to move our way up in the Big Sky Championships and the Big Sky standings every year, we have got to have a team that is well-rounded. We need good sprinters and jumpers and multis and hurdlers and throwers, and even as difficult as the conference is in the distance running portion with the schools that are in the conference.
Yes.
It's important that those areas all contribute. When we go to a Big Sky Indoor Championships or a Big Sky Outdoor Championships, our best chance is to be well-rounded and have the different areas of the team all contributing points in that area. And that's one of the things I've been real pleased about since I've been here is, like you said, the school records and the conference champions that we've had and the conference podium finishers have been across the board. We've had that in the throws. We've had it in the sprints and the jumps, the hurdles, the multis, and the vertical jumps. So we're off to a good start, I think, with the direction that we're going. And a big part of that is because of the assistant coaches that I have who are developing those athletes, recruiting better athletes year to year, bringing the baseline of talent up with each recruiting class. And I feel like we've done that. And that's not just me as a head coach. That's my staff. That's also the athletes on the team doing a great job when we get recruits on campus. It is a full family affair when you're recruiting an athlete, from the head coach all the way down to every single person on your roster. Everybody needs to be involved for that to be a successful venture.
Yes, to see if that kid thinks this place is the right fit.
That's right.
For him or her. All right. You were a 3-time NCAA champion in the pole vault at Fresno State.
Yeah.
How did you like to be led? What resonated or what worked for you as a student athlete in terms of obviously a tremendous level of success individually on your part? How did that happen from a leadership standpoint? How did you like to be coached?
It's interesting with me as an athlete because my father was my coach.
Which is one of my next questions.
Yeah, my father was my coach, and he was a track coach for 60 years in California. And so I grew up around the sport, being exposed to the sport. I always knew that I wanted to go to college to be a track athlete. That was just what I grew up knowing. And so for me, it's a lot different than a lot of athletes who, kind of figure it out once they get good enough. For me, that was the goal, and I was going to find a way to get good enough. From a leadership standpoint, we had a really good track program when I was at Fresno State. I think, good Lord, at one point they had won 20 out of 21 conference championships in a row. And so I was I came into a college program that was bred on success. And really, for me as an athlete going into college, I wanted to be a part of that. I always had a great training group from the time I got into college as a freshman up through the ranks in college. I was able to lean on upperclassmen that were great leaders within our groups, because that's the way that coaching staff worked. Is we had excellent leadership from the coaches, but also one of the key components of it was each group of athletes in each event area had leadership from within. And I think that is a huge component of success in a program. It's not just the leadership of the coach, the head coach, the assistant coaches, but also having key upper class leadership within each event group in the sport of cross-country, track and field. Mm-hmm. Because that's really what a lot of athletes lean on. They look at coaches as an authority figure. They appreciate the accountability that the coaches put forth for them. But a lot of where they really decide they want to be good comes from what they learn from their junior and senior and fifth year teammates.
Yes.
And I think that's an important piece of it. That was a big part of why I was as good as I was in college, is because I was part of a great training group with great leadership, and that has really set the tone for how I like to coach. I like to coach and lead, but I also like to create leaders within the student athlete population on my team. I think that holds great credence with young athletes that are trying to find their way.
Yes. How do you do that?
Well, you really, for me, it's a matter of identifying athletes that I know want and can handle that kind of responsibility. For example, team captains or guys that or gals that you lean on during the course of practice. So-and-so's always in charge of the warm-up. So-and-so's in charge of setup for certain activities that we're doing at practice. Somebody that is going to teach the younger athletes how to operate as a collegiate athlete. And you have to identify those people. You can't just put anybody in that situation. You've got to have somebody that you know wants to have that role and relishes that, and relishes showing freshmen and sophomores the way to go through a warm-up, the way to go through a cool down, the way to take care of your body after practice, the appropriate things to do on the weekends. All of those things carry over into what influence a freshman or a sophomore comes into based on trying to find their way as a youngster in college athletics, because every athlete, regardless of how good they are coming out of high school, you have to find your way in college athletics. And if you have upperclassmen that you know are illustrating and teaching the right way to go about being a college athlete, whether it's from a behavioral standpoint or a training or recovery or nutritional standpoint, that is one of the biggest things that can help a coaching staff.
And I would guess that comes from great familiarity then with those kids.
Absolutely.
And how do you get that?
It's a matter of trust. When you come in, and I will say, since I've been at the University of Montana, I have been so pleased with the level of trust and belief in the system that me and my staff have presented to our athletes, the direction that we present to our athletes. They really have bought in. The ones that didn't want to buy in, they've weeded themselves out. Mm-hmm. But the majority of the athletes that we inherited here when we got here have really bought into the direction of the program. They've bought into the belief system that we are a family of 100 people, and that if everybody's rowing in the same direction, that's when great things happen for 18 to 22-year-old athletes. And so you have to have people that believe in what you're doing in order to be willing to host recruits, to set up for workouts, to lead warm-ups, to have player-only meetings when things need to be increased or turned around a little bit in any sort of way. Those people really have to care about that. And in order for me to know who those people are, I have to know them well. I have to have an open door policy where an athlete can come in and talk to me about what they're thinking. If they have questions, if they have concerns, they need to know that they can come to me or their event coach and be comfortable in that situation, right? Because mm-hmm. a lot of times as an authority figure, people are sheepish about coming and talking to you about concerns they may have. And the first thing you have to let them know when you come in and become their coach is that you have an open door policy. You may not always agree with their point of view, but I think if young people feel like they're being heard, that goes a long way on how they perceive any given conversation, just feeling like they're heard. And so I think that's a big piece of it, is just forming relationships with your student athletes. And through that, you identify the people that are going to be the team leaders, from the student athlete side of things and not the coaching staff side of things.
Yeah. That's one of the things that's always just intrigued me and that I really appreciate about track and field is that the motivation oftentimes is different because you don't have a whole lot of scholarships to give out. It's not like kids are just getting showered with money,
right,
and opportunity. That many of them are competing without money.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
We have a lot of athletes on our team or any track team in college sports. Those are a lot of kids that are paying paying tuition and paying their own freight. And you're right, Charlie, they're doing it because they want to be in sports. They want to be an athlete in college. It is for the pure joy of that.
Yes.
Nobody's getting rich in college athletics unless, they're an Olympic level athlete in college. But the vast majority of college cross country and track and field athletes are in it because it's a sport they love, and they want to go to college. They want to be a part of a great team culture. They want to have that experience, which I always tell recruits is the best experience that you're going to have in life, is going through college athletics and the relationships that you form and the bonds you form with your coaches and teammates. It is a pure form of college athletics, in my opinion, because of that.
Yeah.
They're not doing it for the money.
And then to keep pulling on this thread of a coach's kid.
Yeah.
What was that like? I mean, it's a unique position to be a coach's kid.
It is. And, you hear all these horror stories about people whose parents coach their little league team or their soccer team, or dad's the high school coach, and the student and athlete, the student and coach are always fighting, and that was not that way with my dad. I was very fortunate in a situation that I grew up in. I was exposed to the sport of track and field and cross country my entire life. And me and my dad kind of grew through that together. I was kind of like his shadow when I was a young kid. I would get dropped off at the track after I finished grammar school in time for
practice,
for cross country or track practice, depending on what time of year it was. And I was kind of my dad's shadow. I learned to do every single event in track and field, as well as running cross country when I was coming up, just simply because that's what I wanted to do. My dad was my hero, and it was something that he really enjoyed me being a part of, and I really enjoyed him exposing me to all of the things that I was exposed to as a kid, going to cross-country meets, going to track meets. When there was big competitions in the area, we would always drive to see them. He wanted me to be exposed to the highest levels of track and field. And so it just became a part of me, probably by the time I was in third or fourth grade, that's what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go to college. And I'm going to be a really good track athlete. And then I want to compete after college, which I did for 8 years after I finished my eligibility in college. I competed on the international circuits for 8 years and really had a great experience. But really my upbringing with my dad being my coach was not the horror story that you hear. It was us working together, growing as coach in my dad's situation, and athlete in my own situation. And we collaborated a lot. The older I got, the more he and I collaborated on training and technique and all these different things. And so really, for me, it was a really great experience that I will always cherish.
Just a central part of your relationship.
Absolutely.
Together. Yeah.
It was what we did together.
Yes.
That and fish.
And you've touched on some things, but are there core kind of foundational leadership beliefs that you have? I mean, just things that for Doug Fraley, I mean, these are must-haves, must-dos in terms of kind of leadership components.
I think the biggest thing is putting together a clear direction for a program, for a company, for whatever a person is going to be in a leadership position is having a clear direction. I think oftentimes leaders come in and they say, okay, we're gonna try this, and then they hear about something else and they all of a sudden shift the course for no apparent reason. To me, if you're going to lead a group like a track and cross-country program that I'm leading here at the University of Montana, you need to have a clear vision of what you're going to do. You need to set up accountability measures that young people buy into, that I'm buying into, my staff is buying into. And so they have a clear idea of what the expectations are. I think too often with the sport of track and field in particular, it's so diverse and so segmented in the way things operate that people lose sight of the fact that you have to have team-wide accountability. And whether that is the academic piece, if you don't go to study hall, you don't go to practice until you've made those hours up. We expect our athletes to have a 3.0 GPA or higher. We expect people to come to practice when it's practice time, right? All basic things. You have to set courses for that, and you have to abide by those things. And as a leader, I have to be consistent in how I deal with those things when an athlete doesn't go to study hall or doesn't make a 3.0 or doesn't come to practice on time. I think consistency and clarity for the student athletes, or if it was a corporation, for employees, they know what the situation is. And so they're never guessing how the company or the team is executing. And that should never be in question. So I really think painting a clear picture, a clear course for a team that all the athletes know what A, B, C, and D are for accountability. They know what the goals and tasks are required for success. They know what is acceptable for performance, what is not acceptable for performance standards, whether that be on the track or in the classroom. They know those things. There's no surprises. And there's consistency in how things are run. I think that, to me, is the core of what we're trying to do here at the University of Montana. Is just paint a clear picture for our athletes and then coach them up and make them as good as we can.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like a great formula.
Yeah, but I think consistency with student athletes is important. I always tell kids this, is you can't be a complete dumpster, excuse me, can't be a dumpster fire in one area of your life and super successful in this one area. And that's something I really try to pound home to our team is consistency across the board, socially, academically, family, athletically. All of that needs to be stable in order for our student athletes to have the success that they want to have. And when you teach teams that, and they start to believe that, and they start to grow in that, they do a better job academically, they do a better job socially. All those things come together. Happy athletes compete better than unhappy athletes.
Yes.
It's that simple.
Yeah, Coach Brown said the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of in closing then, Coach, it just sounds like a very, very intentional approach on your part in terms of kind of athlete development and leadership and expectations and what you have as a vision for what this program should look like, and making sure that leadership is a piece of that, not only within yourself, but with your assistant coaches and then also your athletes themselves. Is that a fair assessment? And what else might you add to that?
No, that is a fair assessment, and really an important piece of making my leadership plan work and helping my assistant coaches be successful in their areas is finding the right athletes with the right mentality and the right level of commitment. I think that's an important piece of things. It's no different than if I'm a CEO of a company and I'm trying to hire the right employees for the right positions, right? From the vice president's office down to the mailroom. It's important that you are bringing people in this case, student athletes, that believe in the system, that believe in the progression of progress, and really want to be there in that role as a student athlete. That really is what shores the whole thing up, because we can be the best coaching staff in the world and lay out the best training programs in the world, but if we don't have the right athletes who are buying into the system, that have a high enough talent level, obviously, and want to be as good as they can be, it doesn't matter what our plan is. So I really look at it as, yes, that is my vision for our program, but the staff and myself, we've got to surround ourselves with student athletes that we know, one, are a good fit at the University of Montana, because a place like this is phenomenal, but it's not for everybody,
yes.
Right? And so we need to find the right fits, the right pieces for each one of those positions within our 100-person corporation. And then once we do that, that's when things really start building, and I think that's the point we're starting to get to.
Excellent. And culture is a word that's often
Yeah.
thrown out. What are your thoughts when you hear that word of culture?
Well, I
Because
think,
it seems like much of what you described is part of what you're doing is building a culture of success.
yeah, culture to me is what people's ideas are about what we're doing. Okay? The belief that what we're doing is positive, that it's motivational, that it's helpful, that's good culture. If we had people on our team that did not think we're good coaches and did not have good training progressions and didn't feel like we gave them the opportunities to be as good, that would be bad culture. And so to me, you set up the thing that what culture is it is a byproduct of the beliefs that people have in the program. If it's positive, it's a positive culture. If it's negative, it's a negative culture. And so I think that comes from what people think of the structure that we've put on this team. And that's how I see that. And I think it's very good here at the University of Montana right now.
Good. I think that's a great way to end it. Coach,
All
thanks
right.
so much for making the time to help kind of build our library of head coaches' perspectives on leadership. We're indebted to you for spending the time today to share years worth of wisdom and knowledge. So thank you so much.
My
for
pleasure,
that.
Charlie. Thank you for having me.
All right, and that'll do it for this episode of the Montana Grizzly Leadership Project. Join us next time as we continue our discussions with other head coaches here at U of M to hear their thoughts and ideas on leadership.